what we're going to talk about today. And by the way, I'm just really happy to be here in Atlanta. Not only do I have a lot of friends here and see many of them today, but Atlanta is a great music city, a great arts and entertainment city, and a great business city anyway. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about today, is the relationship between music and entrepreneurship. And I'll just really quickly give you a little bit of my background so it kind of makes sense. I've been working with consumers, which amazingly are your customers too, in the music business, really for my whole career. I've been doing startups for a long time in internet and technology, and of course this was our biggest one, but Priceline is a company that, by the way, which a lot of people don't know, we built a lot of the technology for Priceline right here in Atlanta. I just was trying to avoid, we were getting too much media coverage in the early days, so the outside of the building said Suite 100. And I'll just tell you guys a funny story, because one day I get a call from the governor, who at the time was Roy Barnes. And they're like, and who was the mayor then? Bill Campbell. So I get a call to go to the mayor's office and to go to the governor's office, and I'm like calling my accountant. We paid our taxes, I'm sure. I don't know what they want to see me about. And it was interesting, because when I got down to the governor's office down at the Capitol, which, by the way, this was a great line. I said to him, see, this is the governor, could you come meet with me? And I said, sure, let me get a pen to write down your address. And he said, you know that big giant gold dome in the middle of the city? And I said, yeah, and he said, just point at that. So how would I have known that his office was in the Capitol, per se? But what we talked about was the fact that, Georgia is trying to support, right, more things like the arts and business. What they wanted was to take more credit for the fact that we built a lot of Priceline here. But this is a company where we work with today, it's in 50 different countries. We work with 100 million consumers around the world. This was a startup, like I said, that we built a lot here. Priceline today is worth $54 billion. And I'm going to talk to you about startups. And there's a reason that Shaq asked me to come here and do that. And it's because it's the relationship. When I tell people I'm an internet entrepreneur and I work with consumers and we build a company like this, people say, oh, well, then never mind, because this is the music business. All right? And here's what's interesting to me. They say that, but they don't even realize they're saying the second word. Right? I'm in the music business, okay? So I don't need to worry about all that stuff. I'm an artist. And here's what I want to talk about. I've been very, very blessed in my life and my career to work with a lot of interesting people. And what I always do is study what makes the most successful people in the world. It doesn't matter what they do. What makes them successful? What are they doing that is leading them to the place they got to? So I've had a chance to work with a lot of folks here in Atlanta. I'm going to give you a couple examples in a minute. People in business. One day I spent the whole day with Sam Walton and I said, I'm just going to ask you questions all day long and try to learn something. But it doesn't matter if it's that or sports. Even here in town, the first music company I had a record label, in effect, a little production company here in town with Evander Holyfield. He and I have been friends for a long time, and we messed around and wasted a bunch of money in the music business early on. But for me, I knew that would probably going to happen. We were just trying to help help artists in Atlanta get their start. But here's the interesting thing. Evander climbed his mountain. Isn't that what we're all trying to do? Right? His mountain was sports, but he made it from really, the hood here in Atlanta to heavyweight champion of the world and earning $250 million in his career. He did something right along the way that is the same lesson. In fact, I have a story from him in here as well that made all these successful people successful. So while I've spent most of my career in the internet and in the entrepreneurship space, I've had an entertainment company for the last more than a decade, producing films, producing television, and producing music. So in that space, I have spent time producing tours, producing concerts, producing charity events. I've been involved in your business for a long time. On the business side of it, obviously, but that's what I want to share today, the business side of it. So I'm going to go through these pictures fast because they're a few years old and they're embarrassing. Willie, you were at a lot of these things here, but I did a lot of business over the years with NSYNC, and with that team, from business events to charity events to tour events to concerts. I did a bunch of stuff here in town with Elton. We did charity concerts and events here that Priceline was a sponsor of. I work with Glee and that organization today and people in there, which, as you know, what did Glee do? They only set the new standard for music distribution. If you guys remember, for most of the year, the number one hit every week was not an artist that released a song. It was Glee every week. So like the show or not, you can't disrespect the fact that they developed a new model in the music business. So the business for all these things, working with all these people that have been successful. Again, I was with the NSYNC thing from way back at the beginning before anyone heard of them. And working with Elton John, I asked way more questions of his management team, right? Part of which is here in Atlanta too. But the same thing with everybody that's been successful. I tried to study, what did you do that got you to the top? Again, whether you're an artist, a producer, a distributor. And by the way, I do want to say that when we talk about the music business, we're kind of coming from the viewpoint of the artist. What always makes me nuts is people say, I want to be in the music industry. For every one person standing on the stage with a microphone, 150 people at least produce that show. There are lots of places to be in the music business. One of my, in fact, we produced an event here in Atlanta a couple of years. I think you came to this, Willie. We did an event for the, to raise money for people that couldn't afford transplants. It was called the Transplant Foundation. I found out one day that if you need a liver transplant, you're next on the list and you're poor. When the transplant comes, you have 3 months to live, they call you, and if you don't have $8,000 in 24 hours, they go to the next person on the list. So the question is, what happens to poor people who need organs? And the answer is they die. So what we said was, why don't we get the music industry to do a charity event to raise money to put in a fund so the next person on the list, if you happen to be broke, will buy the organ for you so you don't die just because you didn't have money. So we got a bunch of the American Idol artists to come to this, and I hosted it with, some of you may be too young to know him, but Robert Redford, the actor, and he and I hosted that event here in Atlanta. And we had some of these artists, and there was a songwriter. This just really was interesting to me. Rivers Rutherford is his name. He's a country music songwriter. And we had the guy come and perform as well. And he stood up here, and he'd start playing a song. And he'd say, you know that song? And everyone would say, sure, that was a, whoever, that was a Faith Hill #1 hit, right? And then he'd start playing another song. You know that song, whatever country artist it was. He had like 6 #1 hits in country. And he was playing them. But he'd start playing them, and he'd say, you know that song, don't you? And we'd say, we sure do. And he'd say, I wrote that. And then he'd play another #1 hit that might have been a Lone Star song or something. So you know that song? Of course. It was #1. He said, I wrote that. This was what was interesting to me. He makes more money than all those entertainers combined because he wrote all their songs, right? But he doesn't have to deal with fame. He doesn't have to deal with touring. He just sits at home and collects checks. And it just struck me because I meet so many artists that are so talented that they could make an unbelievable living just writing. Good writing is the hardest thing to find out there. There's way more vocalists. There are 70,000 people in American Idol audition. There are not 70,000 writers standing alongside them. So it amazed me that people don't look at the business and the other parts. But here's the thing. People tell me, well, it's the music business when I talk to them, right? You don't get it, we're in the music business. And let me say this about all the entertainment, the performing arts, etc. The reason there are so many people that think to themselves, I'm such a good artist, I'm such a good writer, producer, whatever, so how come I haven't climbed my mountain? How come I'm not as successful as I thought I was? It's because they think this is art, not business. They forget that it's a business. You have a product. You have a market. You have to distribute. You might need to raise money. You want to know something? That's all the stuff I do every day when I launch a company like Priceline. When we're building businesses, we're doing the same thing. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is this. You may be an artist, you may be a producer, whatever you are an entrepreneur. And the sooner you start to study entrepreneurship, and the sooner you realize that your career is a startup, whatever you're doing, you're no different than any internet startup. You are a startup, and I'm going to tell you some tips on how to be a startup. You're an entrepreneur launching a startup. Even if the product is your voice and your songs, it is still a product that needs a market, that needs distribution, that needs financing, that needs somebody to do the accounting in the back end. Your problems are no different than any company that I've ever launched. It's a product, a market, and a business wrapped around it. What I noticed was common about the most successful artists in the world, performers, whatever, was they figured out they were part of a business and they behaved that way. You're an entrepreneur, okay? So you can't just create a song, you got to launch a business. And if you're spending no time understanding what entrepreneurs do and how to launch a business, then then you're missing the big opportunity. And I'm going to tell you some examples of some artists here. In fact, I can tell you one now. I just remember a couple of these meetings. For example, sitting with Elton John one day, and the discussion was about marketing. Hey, I know that the internet is a great marketing tool, but I'm a piano player. I don't know how to use the internet. So why would he talk to a guy like me? Because it takes all the pieces of a business that we just described in order for you to win. So the smart ones say, I need to have all these things. I need to understand them. And I'll talk to you in a minute about how you can build a team to do